The evening light slid through the kitchen window, soft and golden, touching the table where Adam and I sat. I watched him move his fork aimlessly, never lifting his eyes from his plate. It felt like sitting across from a ghost who looked exactly like my husband. Every sound in the room, the clink of silverware, the hum of the refrigerator, seemed to mock the silence between us. I used to fill that silence with laughter, but now it just swallowed me whole. I could feel the distance growing, one quiet dinner at a time. Finally, I broke the quiet. "You've barely touched your food, Adam. Is something wrong?" I tried to sound gentle, not accusing. He didn't even look at me. "I'm just tired," he said, his voice clipped, distant. My stomach nodded, not from the food but from the way his tone cut through me. "It's not reading into things if it's obvious," I murmured. That's when he sighed, slammed his fork down, and called me dramatic. The words stung like a slap. I just sat there, watching him, the man who used to touch my face like it was something sacred. Now he wouldn't even meet my gaze. My chest tightened, and all I could think was, when did I start talking to a stranger who looks like my husband? That night, while he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, counting the seconds between his breaths. Each one sounded like a lie I hadn't discovered yet, and I couldn't help but wonder who he was dreaming about. The next morning, the smell of coffee filled the kitchen, but it didn't warm the air between us. Adam scrolled through his phone, half smiling at something I wasn't part of. I asked if he wanted breakfast, but he just grunted, never looking up. That half smile haunted me all day. It wasn't mine anymore, and I knew it. I folded laundry, cleaned the house, kept myself busy, anything to stop replaying his face in my mind. But silence has a way of following you, doesn't it? Every time I tried to talk to him, it felt like walking barefoot on broken glass. He'd roll his eyes, say I was too emotional, that I needed to stop imagining things. I used to fight back, but lately, I just swallowed it all. It's strange. You can live with someone for years and still feel invisible. Sometimes I'd stand in the hallway and listen to his voice on the phone, the softness in his tone that he no longer used with me. It made my stomach twist, like something dying slowly inside. That night, he came to bed late again. I pretended to be asleep, breathing evenly, but my mind was wide awake. The mattress dipped as he lay down, and I wondered if he even noticed how far apart we were on that bed. I turned my face toward the window, staring at the faint glow of the streetlight. The silence between us wasn't peaceful anymore. It was loud, accusing, alive. And beneath that silence, a new emotion began to stir. Not sadness, not yet anger, but something colder, something waiting. The days started blending together. His short answers, my long silences, and that growing ache I couldn't name. I kept trying to find him in the small things, the way he used to kiss my forehead, the little notes he'd leave by the coffee pot. But they were gone, like someone had quietly erased the version of him I loved. I told myself it was stress, that work was getting to him, but deep down, I knew. You can feel when love is leaving, even before the door closes. It's like air thinning in the room. One evening, I caught my reflection in the window while waiting for him to come home. I barely recognized the woman staring back. Tired eyes, forced smile, shoulders that didn't stand as tall. I whispered to her, "What happened to us?" The words felt heavy, like I'd spoken them into an empty church. When he finally walked through the door, he didn't even glance my way. No kiss, no hello. Just a man carrying silence like a weapon. I knew then that something inside me had cracked, quietly but completely. That night, lying next to him, I felt his steady breathing and wondered who had taken my place in his dreams. I used to find comfort in those sounds, but now they made my heart ache. I stared into the darkness, thinking how love can rot in the same bed it once bloomed. And as I lay there, motionless, a thought whispered through the quiet. Maybe the only way to survive this distance is to stop pretending it isn't there. It didn't happen all at once. His coldness turned into cruelty so gradually that I almost missed the moment it shifted. One morning, he brushed past me in the hallway like I was invisible, and that became our new normal. I'd hear him laugh softly at his phone, that low, private chuckle that used to belong to me. My stomach would twist, and I'd pretend I hadn't noticed. Love makes you good at pretending. Too good sometimes. You start lying to yourself just to survive the truth. That afternoon, I walked into the living room and found him staring at his phone again, smiling faintly. "Who's making you smile like that?" I asked, trying to sound light, even playful. But the second the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. His face changed, hard, cold, annoyed. "Jesus, do you ever stop?" he snapped, standing up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. The sound made me flinch, but I stood my ground. My voice trembled when I said, "I'm just asking because I care." He stepped closer, lowering his voice in that dangerous way people do when they want to be cruel without raising their volume. "Care less, Victoria. You'll live longer." The words sank into me like ice water, spreading fast, numbing everything warm. For a second, I couldn't breathe. He turned away, and I just stared at his back, broad, familiar, yet suddenly foreign. And all I could think was how the man who used to protect me from fear had become the one creating it. After that day, I started moving around the house like a ghost, quiet, cautious, measuring my words before speaking. The smallest things set him off: a question, a sigh, even the sound of my footsteps. I learned to read his moods like weather patterns, hoping to predict the next storm. He'd leave his phone face down, guard it like a secret. Once, when I reached for it by mistake, he snatched it back so fast it made me flinch. That's when I stopped asking. Silence felt safer than honesty. But safety came at a cost. I began shrinking in my own home, walking softer, breathing quieter. I'd sit at the kitchen table, watching the steam rise from my tea, thinking how love isn't supposed to make you afraid to exist. He'd come home later and later, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. Each night, I told myself there had to be an explanation, some innocent reason. But lies have a scent, too. You can smell them long before you name them. Sometimes I'd hear laughter through his phone calls, light, feminine, careless, and I'd feel my heart pulled tight like a thread about to snap. I used to believe we could fix anything if we just tried hard enough. But what do you fix when you're the only one still trying? One evening, I caught my reflection in the dark window again, and I barely recognized her. My eyes looked tired, but something else was there now, a quiet kind of strength forming beneath the ache. One night, he came home later than usual, his eyes glassy, his shirt wrinkled, his tie loosened like a man who didn't owe anyone answers. I asked where he'd been, and he laughed, that hollow, mocking laugh that doesn't reach the eyes. "You really need a hobby, Victoria," he said. My throat burned with words I couldn't say. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth. But I just stood there, frozen in the space where love used to live. His indifference was louder than any argument could have been. When he finally went to bed, I stayed in the kitchen, staring at the half-empty glass of wine he'd left behind. The air still smelled like his cologne, sharp, expensive, foreign. I ran my finger around the rim of the glass, tracing the moment where everything had shifted. The woman I used to be would have begged for an explanation. The woman I was becoming sat in silence, realizing that begging for love was the most painful kind of self-betrayal. I wiped the counter slowly, like I was erasing the last illusion. In the days that followed, I stopped asking, stopped chasing, stopped waiting for him to notice. I moved through the house like someone studying the wreckage of a fire, careful not to disturb what was already gone. But in the quiet corners of my mind, something small began to stir. Not revenge, not yet, but awareness. I could feel it, a faint spark of resolve taking shape behind the grief. I didn't know it yet, but this was the night everything began to change. I woke up that morning with an idea, fragile but shining, like a spark in the dark. If he'd stopped remembering what love looked like, maybe I could remind him. I told myself it wasn't desperation, just hope in disguise. I spent the day planning something simple. Candles, lasagna, the wine he loved. The kind of evening that once felt effortless between us. Maybe if he saw me trying, he'd remember who we were before everything cracked. Maybe effort could still bridge the distance. When he came home that night, I smiled softly. "I'll be at my parents' this weekend," I told him, pretending casual. "They miss me." He barely looked up from his phone. "Yeah, do whatever you want," he said, his voice flat, dismissive. That should have hurt more than it did, but I was already somewhere else in my mind, planning, rehearsing, holding on to the tiny hope that love might still answer if I called it softly enough. I kissed his cheek before bed, knowing it was probably the last time. The next evening, after he left, I came back quietly. The house felt different, empty but honest. I set the table, lit the candles, and placed his favorite meal in the center. The flicker of the flames danced against the glass, and for a moment, I imagined him walking through the door smiling like before. My heart ached with that image, the man I fell for, not the stranger I'd been living with. I took a deep breath, straightened the napkins, and waited, not knowing the kind of truth that was about to arrive. Hours passed. The lasagna had gone cold, and the wax from the candles ran down like tears on the tablecloth. I checked the clock again, 10, then 11. My hope started to wither, replaced by that heavy stillness you feel before something breaks. Then suddenly, headlights flashed through the window. My pulse jumped. I smoothed my dress, took a deep breath, and forced a smile. This was it. Maybe, finally, we'd find our way back to each other. But the sound that followed wasn't one set of footsteps. It was two. The door opened, and laughter spilled in before they did. A young woman, hair glossy and lips bright, stumbled in behind him, her hand still on his arm. For a second, I couldn't move. It felt like the air was sucked out of the room. "Adam." "Who is she?" I asked, though my voice barely made a sound. His face changed from surprise to fury in an instant. "What the hell are you doing here?" he barked. My heart pounded so loudly I thought they could hear it. "I made dinner," I said quietly. "For us." The woman's eyes darted between us, her unease painting the walls. Adam's voice sharpened like glass. "You can stop this pathetic act, Victoria. I don't love you. I never did." My knees almost gave out, but I didn't let them see me fall. "After everything," I whispered, my voice shaking. He stepped closer, his eyes full of warning, not remorse. "If you try to ruin my life," he hissed, "things will get ugly. You understand?" And in that moment, something inside me, something sacred, finally broke free. I didn't say another word. He shoved past me, muttering to the girl, "Ignore her. She's crazy." That word, crazy, burned deeper than any insult could. It wasn't anger that filled me then, not even heartbreak. It was clarity, the kind that hits like a slap, sharp and awakening. I stood there in the candlelight, the meal I'd made still untouched, the smell of garlic and betrayal thick in the air. My hands trembled, but not from fear. It was something colder, steadier, the beginning of resolve. They disappeared down the hall, and I stayed frozen in the dining room, listening to the sound of his voice, low, confident, poisonous. Every syllable confirmed what I already knew. Love was gone, but control was what he fed on. I blew out the candles one by one, watching the smoke curl upward like little ghosts of what used to be. Each wisp felt like a promise, a quiet reminder that this night wouldn't end in silence. Not for me, not anymore. When I finally sat down, the house seemed to hum around me as if it knew what I was thinking. The photos on the wall looked different now, no longer memories, but evidence. I looked at our wedding picture and smiled, not with sadness, but with certainty. He thought he'd won. He thought I'd break, but he didn't know what kind of woman silence could build. That night, while he slept beside someone else, I began building my own kind of storm, one that would make him remember my name. In the days that followed, I became a different kind of quiet, the kind that watches, learns, waits. I smiled when he spoke, cooked his meals, nodded when he criticized the way I folded towels. He thought my silence meant surrender, but it wasn't. It was strategy. I had spent years loving a man who used power like oxygen. Now I was learning how to take it from him, one breath at a time. Every "yes, dear" was a thread I was weaving into something much bigger. He stopped hiding his disdain, walking around the house like a king without a crown. I let him believe it. I played the part, the obedient wife, the broken bird who'd given up. But behind that quiet face, I was building a map in my mind. Passwords, patterns, names. He didn't notice when I started writing things down, small details that would soon become ammunition. Each lie he told me became a breadcrumb leading me somewhere powerful, somewhere free. One evening, I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the calm woman staring back. There was no trace of fear left in her eyes, only precision. I thought of all the times he'd called me dramatic, irrational, weak. He had no idea he'd been training me for this moment, sharpening me with every cruel word. I smiled faintly, turning off the light. Tomorrow, I'd start collecting the proof I needed, not just of his betrayal, but of the man he really was beneath the charm. The next morning, I began my routine like any other day. Coffee, dishes, silence. But behind that ordinary rhythm, I was laying the foundation for something extraordinary. I found his receipts tucked in jacket pockets, his emails open on the laptop he thought I never touched. I started small, a photo here, a copied file there. It felt strange, holding secrets of my own for once. Each discovery made my heart race, not from fear, but from control. For the first time in years, I wasn't powerless. When I met with the lawyer, my hands shook at first. He specialized in domestic intimidation and financial fraud, two words that suddenly defined my marriage. I told him everything, every threat, every shift in Adam's tone, every cent that didn't add up. He listened without flinching, then said, "You're smarter than you think, Victoria. We'll get him." Walking out of that office, I felt lighter, like I'd been holding my breath for too long. The world outside looked sharper, more real. Hope had teeth again. That night, I called Clara, the one friend who never stopped believing I'd find my way out. She didn't even hesitate. "We'll do this together," she said. And we did. She helped me set up hidden cameras, one in the living room, one in his office, one near the front door. I felt my pulse quicken as the red lights blinked to life. It wasn't fear anymore. It was focus. Every recording, every file, every whisper of proof was a step closer to freedom, a step closer to justice. The first night the cameras recorded, I barely slept. I lay in bed, listening to the faint hum of the devices hidden around the house. It felt strange, empowering, almost holy, to know the truth would soon speak for itself. Days passed, and the footage began to tell its story. His late-night phone calls, the woman's laughter echoing through the hallway, the moments he'd mutter threats under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. Watching it was painful, but also liberating. Each frame was a nail in the coffin of his lies. When Clara and I reviewed the clips together, she looked at me like I was someone new. "You sure about this?" she asked softly. "You could just leave." I smiled faintly, shaking my head. He took my love, my trust, my peace. I'll leave when I take back everything else. My voice didn't shake when I said it. It felt good, solid, grounded, real. Clara nodded, tears glistening in her eyes, then squeezed my hand. "Then let's make sure he never forgets who you are." By the end of the week, I had everything: videos, voice recordings, bank transfers, even messages that proved his affairs weren't his only crimes. He'd been stealing from his company for years. The man who once called me dramatic was about to face a truth louder than any argument. As I organized the evidence into neat labeled folders, I realized something. Revenge wasn't rage. It was clarity. And mine would come in the shape of a dinner invitation, the last one he'd ever deserve. I invited him over on a Friday night, the kind of night when the world feels soft and forgiving. My message was simple: we need to talk. He agreed immediately, almost smugly, like a man certain he'd already won. I set the table again, the same way I had weeks before, Candles, wine, perfect symmetry. But this time, it wasn't for love. It was for truth. The air itself seemed to know it. Every flicker of the flame felt like a secret ready to ignite. When he arrived, he wore that familiar arrogance like cologne. "Finally realized you can't live without me?" he said with a smirk. I smiled back, calm, almost kind. "Something like that." He didn't notice the tiny camera blinking in the corner, or the way my hand didn't tremble when I poured his wine. Watching him sit there, so sure of his control, was like staring at a painting you once loved and finally seeing all the cracks. I'd never seen him look smaller. He talked as he ate, boasting, criticizing, dismissing, the same tired performance he'd perfected for years. I let him speak, nodding, even laughing once or twice. But inside, I was miles away, already at the moment when everything would shift, when the truth would finally speak louder than his voice. I reached for my glass, studying him the way he used to study me, with quiet calculation. And as I watched him chew that last bite, I knew exactly what I was about to do next. He leaned back in his chair, glass of wine in hand, that smug grin never leaving his face. "You know," he said, "you always overreact. That's your problem." His voice dripped with condescension, the same poison I'd swallowed for years. I let him talk, let him spin his little narrative one last time. Then I smiled, slow, deliberate. "You once told me," I said softly, "that if I ever tried to ruin your life, things would get ugly." He laughed, missing the shift in my tone completely. "And I meant it," he replied. I tilted my head, meeting his eyes. "Good," I said, "because I want you to see what ugly really looks like." I reached into my bag and slid my phone across the table. His expression barely changed at first, just confusion. But when the screen lit up and he saw the videos, the audio, the documents, I watched his confidence unravel in real time. His smirk faltered. His hand froze. The color drained from his face like paint washed off by rain. I didn't blink. I wanted him to see me this time. On the screen, there he was, yelling, threatening, kissing her in our kitchen, signing fraudulent transfers. Every lie, every betrayal, every cruel word, finally exposed under the same soft light that once lit our love. He reached for the phone, but I pulled it back slowly. "Don't worry," I whispered. "It's already in the right hands." His voice cracked, desperate now. "Victoria, we can fix this." I stood up, my chair scraping the floor. "No," I said, steady and cold. "I already did." He stood up fast, knocking his chair backward. "You don't know what you're doing," he shouted, but the fear in his voice betrayed him. I watched him, the man who used to call me weak, now trembling under the weight of his own truth. For years he made me question my sanity. Tonight, I made him question his safety. "Sit down," I said quietly. And somehow, he did. The power had shifted, and we both knew it. For the first time, silence belonged to me. He tried again, softer this time. "Victoria, listen, we can talk, we can fix it." His voice cracked around the word fix, like even he didn't believe it anymore. I gathered my things slowly, methodically, the way you do when leaving a place you've already mourned. "You should eat," I told him. "You'll need the energy." He didn't move. I turned toward the door, my heart steady, my mind clear. Behind me, the footage kept playing, his own voice sealing his fate in digital ink. As I reached the doorway, I looked back one last time. He was still sitting there, frozen, surrounded by evidence and candlelight. The same table where I once begged for love was now his reckoning. "You always said I was dramatic," I said softly. "Turns out you were right." I walked out into the night, the cold air hitting my skin like freedom. Behind me, his empire of lies began to crumble, and I didn't have to lift another finger. His ending had already been written, and I was finally free to write mine. It's been months since that dinner, and I still remember the sound of the door closing behind me, the quiet click that ended a chapter of my life. I live by the sea now. Mornings smell like salt and coffee instead of tension and fear. My lawyer called today. Adam's been convicted. Fraud, assault, intimidation. The list was long. The house, the cars, the accounts, all gone. Justice has a rhythm of its own, slow but deliberate, and hearing it unfold felt like breathing for the first time in years. Clara met me at our favorite cafe this morning, her smile as warm as the sunlight glinting off the waves. She set 2 cups of coffee on the table and said, "You really did it, Vic. You turned the monster inside out." I laughed softly, the sound unfamiliar but welcome. "He thought fear would keep me small," I said, stirring my coffee, "but silence taught me how to fight back." Clara reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We didn't need more words. Some victories are best honored in stillness. Now, when I look at the horizon, it feels like looking into possibility. Endless, untouched. I used to wonder who I was without him. Now I know. I'm the woman who walked through fire and didn't burn. The woman who turned pain into strategy, love into strength, and silence into her sharpest weapon. He taught me pain, but I taught him consequence. The ocean hums softly in the distance, steady and calm. And for the first time in a long time, so am I.